Over the past few decades, Bali went from unknown paradise to a tourist mecca, one of the world's most famous tourist destinations. Australians basically treat Bali as part of Australia now, and influencers and digital nomad types are moving there and staying there in large numbers. This has caused an economic boom for those involved in the tourist industry, but there is a dark side. It is no secret that for decades, foreign tourism has ravaged Bali's culture and even their economic potential. For starters, the tourism industry has caused far more damage to the local economy in the long run than it has benefited it. It's never a good idea to put all the eggs in one basket. In any investment or in any economy, it's best to diversify. Too much reliance on foreign tourism can cause a boom and bust cycle when outside factors, like a worldwide pandemic for example, have a major effect on the tourism economy. There is nothing to fall back upon. It is a well-known fact that for every 100 American dollars spent by foreigners in Bali, and the rest of Southeast Asia for that matter, only around $5 actually enters the locals' pockets. The environmental damage to the island alone completely destroys that small $5 factor of that money entering the economy per 100 spent. 80% of all tourism-related businesses in Bali are owned by foreigners, and the profits just exit the country. Well, none of it trickles to the locals. It's very obvious during the pandemic that rich foreigners are doing just fine, but the locals are the ones suffering the most. We have also been seeing shocking reports about the tourism industry committing human rights violations. It's downright disgusting and sad how most people will ignore this. You can do research on this as well. It is just more proof that tourism in these areas is really just modernized colonialism. I would also like to mention how many Westerners are disrespecting the Indonesian people for not reopening Bali. Even though thousands of Indonesians are dying from the pandemic, the foreigners were insulting the locals. However, I read many local articles, and many Indonesians are calling out the fact that these Western tourists are the ones that bring the virus to Bali in the first place. The new variant of the virus was most likely brought into Indonesia by a foreign tourist. Speaking of which, there is a Canadian vlogger named Lost LeBlanc. He has been promoting tourism and promoting foreigners to come to Indonesia all throughout the pandemic. He does not care that his actions are literally killing locals, and the amount of narcissism is unbelievable. Unfortunately, Lost LeBlanc is not alone. There are literally hundreds of videos from foreigners promoting tourism and travel to Bali during the pandemic. Make no mistake, these narcissistic people have spread new variants, and they have the blood of the locals on their hands. These narcissistic people are also not wanted in Indonesia. They cause far more problems than benefits, and many Indonesians are waking up to this. Tourism is supposedly officially closed in Indonesia to ensure the safety of the locals. But these narcissistic foreigner vlogger types, they exploit a business visa to enter the country for tourism. And they even make tutorials on how to do it, how to get around the system, how to scam the system. They even say in their videos that they are just tourists. So how does that work? If they don't have tourism and they're in the middle of a pandemic, how does it work that you're a tourist and you're staying there? It doesn't work because they've scammed the system. They found loopholes and they're exploiting those loopholes. I hope these people are blacklisted from these countries for causing so much damage. We must also talk about an American woman who was deported from Indonesia because she made guides, online guides, about how to live in Bali and work in Bali illegally during the pandemic. She basically embraced the modernized colonization of Bali and made all of us foreigners look like narcissistic, selfish idiots. Thankfully, she was deported, but the damage has already been done. And unfortunately, there are so many other bad foreigners that exploit Indonesia, and they also need to be deported. The crazy thing is that Bali has seen hundreds, if not thousands, of badly behaving foreigners at a time when there should be very few foreign tourists. There was some moron that painted a mask on their face as a bad prank. He got deported. There was a Russian couple filming an explicit adult video in public on a mountain, and the police are searching for them to arrest them for breaking local laws. The list goes on. European adult content producers love Bali, and they make adult videos on the beach and in waterfalls. This is a culturally conservative country. Do they even think about how locals, government, and others are going to feel about this? I wonder how many cases of bad foreigners before the pandemic went unreported. Let's also talk about how Balinese people have been changing their minds on foreign tourism for years now. I talked to many Balinese in 2019, before the pandemic. They told me the Balinese people are actually getting sick of the exploitation from some foreigners. And now more than ever, the Balinese are getting sick of this. For example, pre-pandemic, all of the major news sources lied and were all pro-tourism, but a mainstream news network made a video called The Year Tourism Stopped, got 3.4 million views, and rather than praising tourism, they exposed the truth. They showed the dark side of tourism as well. The locals interviewed talked about how foreigners have been destroying their home island and culture. They expressed a desire to diversify their economy and do away with a tourism-based economy. They also said that in 2002 and 2005, due to bad events, we know what those were, the tourists left Bali. It happened again in 2017 due to a volcano, and now during the pandemic. The tourists left, and the locals were left poor and hungry. They had nothing to fall back upon. They had no other options. This all shows how unreliable tourism is. They put all their eggs in one basket, and the locals are sick of it. It was a great documentary coming from a Western source. It demonstrates the changing attitudes. Over-tourism and overexposure caused by exploiting foreigners like bloggers, Instagrammers, and TikTokers have been destroying local culture and been westernizing Indonesia. We all know that social culture in Western countries like America, Australia, Canada is actually very toxic. People don't not even know their own neighbors. The culture is cliquish and exclusive. People only talk to you if it's for business purposes. If you're not in their circle of friends, people won't be open to meeting you or talking to you or even smiling at you. People are very fake as well. This is actually the opposite of Balinese culture and all Indonesian cultures. When you go out alone in America or Canada, you stay alone. And in Indonesia, if you go out alone, you meet new people. Most people from Asia that live in the West would actually prefer to live back in their home countries. And this is mainly due to that toxic culture I'm talking about. They only really come to the West for work, for economic purposes, and that's it. It's very obvious that people in Indonesia would like to preserve their friendly culture and protect it. Also, keep in mind that Indonesia can modernize without being westernized. Modernization and westernization are not one and the same. Another aspect is the dating culture of the West. It's terrible. It's an animalistic world of double standards, unreasonable requirements, hypergamy, and promiscuity. Hypergamy exists in all women. However, it is not as bad in places like Indonesia due to the culture that condemns things like promiscuity and hypergamy. Hypergamy causes 80% of women to only want the top 20% of men. This is actually very uncivilized, and it's something like a pack of animals, like wolves or lions, would do. There are no real winners in this ridiculous world. Promiscuity is condemned in Indonesia as it should be. Science has already proven that the more partners a woman has, the harder it will be to stay with one person and be happy. The same was not found in men. Unfortunately, Western culture is seeping into Indonesia like OnlyFans, turning men into simps, women into entitled brats that think selling explicit photos of themselves is a normal way to make a living. It is not. Same goes for Tinder. Women should never just be praised and treated like queens just for being a woman. Men need to stop being simps. This neo-feminism is bad for society. And this makes for a crumbling society. And that is one of the reasons why the West is in the state that it's in. Men are not allowed to be men, and women are allowed to be put on a pedestal and given things at the expense of men. This means that women will never take responsibility for their own actions in many cases. And men are to blame, according to this neo-feminism idea. And if you even talk about this in the West, you will be bullied. You will be called names like a misogynist or an anti-feminist. But people in Indonesia don't want this toxic culture. They don't want this exploitation. And that is what a lot of foreigners, I think, also they don't want that. That's one of the reasons why they leave the West, is to get away from that toxic culture. And this is one of the reasons why Balinese and Indonesians don't want their country to become too westernized, and it will become too westernized with over-tourism and overexposure from these types that we talked about. So thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe this video, and feel free to leave a comment in the comment section.